Hello, welcome to this video explaining the FireSmart homeowner assessment process. This brief video will kind of go through the steps to help you determine what factors around your home create the greatest risk of wildfire being able to catch your home on fire, or vice versa, if you have a fire from your home, it getting into the wilds around your house and carrying on through the rest of the neighborhood. So I'm going to include a copy of this PDF in a link below the video, but basically have a PDF that's available through the FireSmart program in Manitoba, and I'll be walking through that to help describe the program. So important to remember that this isn't a cure-all, or you do this once and forget about it. It's kind of a longer-term process, and you can do these assessments anytime you like. I'm just going to do my home as an example. I do live in the RM as well. And I've been working towards FireSmarting my house ever since I've learned more and more about the program. As your FireSmart rep for the RM, I just did some training last spring that helped me figure out more about this process and doing assessments. So as you can see, the scorecard's set up fairly logically. The first part of the assessment process is basically your home and within 10 meters of your home, because that's, if you watch the first video on the series about FireSmart, the zone 1 is kind of the most critical for dealing with as a priority compared to any other zones around your house. So the first, and it's a series of questions that you can answer to determine what risk factors are the greatest. So you can tell even by this first question, if you have unrated wood shakes, that puts you up in 30 points right away, and anything 30 and above is a high risk factor. So you can see just by changing your roofing material, if you have wood shakes, will significantly decrease your risk. Most people in the RM probably have an asphalt shingle, and those are well rated for fire. They're hard to catch on fire, don't burn that easily, and they're pretty fire resistant. In this case, I've actually got a metal roof, so that risk factor for our house is pretty low, and you can see that's the case with most roofing materials. One factor that many people deal with is how clean your roof is. If you have a lot of trees around your home, it's pretty easy to build up over time. I know this is an issue I had fairly chronically until recently. I put in, had screens put over my rain gutters or eaves troughs. And so now mine is pretty good, so I can rate that as probably a 0 or maybe a 1 once in a while. Depending on the complexity of your roof, sometimes in the gullies or the valleys you can get small debris and tree limbs from windstorms building up in there, so it's a good idea to clean that off once in a while. Then it won't have fire won't have a starting point up there. The next factor you look at is what's the exterior home built of. Now these things, you're not going to change overnight, but you may look at over long term when you're looking at replacing things. You can see the lowest rated materials are wood, vinyl siding, or wood shakes. We had cedar siding on our prior, and we just replaced ours a few years ago with a cement board type of siding, and that improved our fire rating by a dramatic amount. So anything non-combustible like stucco or metal siding or brick would be rated quite well. So that's kind of what we're dealing with in this case. This is what our house is made of. Vinyl, it looks pretty similar to our cement board, but and it's actually not that much cheaper than the cement board. The problem with it is that when it gets heated, it melts, and so then you pretty much have the exposed wrap and plywood underneath that. So that's why it's not rated terribly well, but it's a relatively low factor compared to roofing and some other things. How fire resistant are your windows and doors? A lot of people are putting in the well insulated triple pane, and if you have large windows with landscaping like trees right outside of it, it's a bit bigger of a risk factor. We have really large triple pane, so it's probably about a 1 factor, but you can just mark it as that for now. Let's put a 1. Tempered glass then is pretty durable, but I think it's fairly pricey. But these aren't huge factors unless you have, just a cabin with really light glass in it. Glass is often the first thing that heats and breaks, and allows an entry point into your house. And once the heat gets in and embers, then there's lots of things inside your house that can catch fire. So eaves at the end of your rafters, if you have soffits and fascia, and it's all closed up with fine mesh, then that's ideal. If they're open or not screened, you can get embers in there that get up and underneath your roof and start. So most people generally have those closed in now with soffits. Metal soffits would be the best. And so that's most of the factors right of the home materials. Then the next thing to consider is, and this is pretty common in this area, if you have a deck or balcony or a porch that's raised up on a foundation. If that's sheathed in with fire-resistant materials or not sheathed in, ours isn't sheathed, but quite a bit off the ground, and keep underneath clear, and it's crushed rock, so there's no real combustibles down there. So even though ours isn't sheathed, I think it's probably a little bit lower risk factor. I'll just put a 6 there for now. But if you're sheathed in with wood, then it's better. You don't get as much leaves and small debris building up. But then if you have it sheathed in with something fire resistant like brick or rocks, then that's the best. So is your home set back from the edge of a slope? Not a big factor here. There's some homes I know northeast Donald that are in hilly part. So if you are on a slope, fire runs up slopes pretty intensely. So you should, if possible, take that into consideration. If you're in the mid or upper portion, the crest of a hill that's higher. We're on a bit of a hill here, but it's, it might be a 3 factor for us. If you're in a flat area, then it's not a really factor. So our home score ends up being 19, which isn't too bad. Then the rest of zone 1 is some of the outbuildings. So how far away from the home is here are other buildings. Here are sheds more than 10 meters away, which is what you'd like to see. And if you have a wood pile, it's good to keep that well away from your house. maybe a little less of a factor in the winter, but certainly during potential fire season or high fire danger, you want to make sure you don't have wood stacked up very close to your home. And trees. So what kind of trees are around your home within especially the first 10 meters or 30 feet? It says on here, this is one thing I disagree with on this form, is not all deciduous trees are really low rated, but certainly one of the more common trees we have in this area, the aspen poplar or white poplar, a lot of people call it. And those are those tall trees that lose their leaves in the summer. They don't really have very many branches up them at all, and they produce a seed pod in the spring. That's about the only time they're really flammable, but that's for like a few days in the spring when they're budding out. And the rest of the time they're pretty fire resistant. Mixed wood, so if you have both coniferous and deciduous trees, that's obviously more of a concern. So coniferous trees are like Christmas trees, if you will. They have needles. They don't lose them they lose a few of them at a time fairly steadily, but they keep them on the branches year round. Whereas deciduous means they shed their leaves in the summer, or in the winter rather. So if you have spruce, pine, fir, or cedar, or juniper within that 10 meters of your home, that right away puts you up in a high risk for fire transferring from those trees into your home. And we do have some mixed wood here, but I've been working steadily towards reducing that number down. So I've, over the last 3 years, taken out strategically, so it's not a complete landscaping shock, removed some of the riskier trees that are close to windows, or if they have branches that are touching each other, thinning them out and planting more of these trees that don't burn very well, like poplar or maples or ash trees, or even chokecherries and those kind of shrub bushes. I'd be careful about putting birch really close to your home, though. Birch has a bark that is very flammable, and from our wildland fire experience, they burn very hot, and they tend to grow up lots of stems. So I would not recommend putting birch within 10 meters of your home. And then what kind of surface vegetation do you have around within 10 meters? If you have lawn and landscaping material, then that's obviously low. If you have high grass or shrubs and branches and trees and needles on the ground, then that's going to be a bigger risk factor. So we have just lawn in our home, so that adds up to 30 for that zone. So for us, oops, it doesn't seem to want to hold that value. I'll have to fix that up. So obviously for us, the big factor to consider is just watching where those conifer trees are. And I think for most people that would be one of the bigger issues. And then less of a concern, but certainly something to look at managing, is within 10 to 30 meters. And there it's less of an issue to have mixed wood coniferous forest out there. So if you want screening for your home and that lasts year round, it's good to have those conifers out there. Just make sure that they're thinned so that their branches aren't touching, and that the branches close to the ground are trimmed off, so there's no ladder fuel, so fire can't climb from grass from the ground up into those trees and then create a crown fire. So they recommend trimming them up to about 2 meters high, or about roughly how high people are tall, or a little taller than that. and just cleaning up any twigs and branches and needles that are piled, so there's no real spots where fire can get nestled in and create more firebrands and cause it to spread. And yeah, so here it gives a couple illustrations about separated trees where the crowns do not touch or overlap that much. Not a big issue with aspen or a lot of deciduous trees because it's not going to have a crown fire, very rarely anyway. Extremely unusual for it to run in deciduous trees, but certainly with these Christmas tree style trees, if they're touching, then that's a bit of a concern, that you can get a whole bunch of them in a line, and then it'll carry the fire closer to your home or your neighbors' homes. So you put all those scores together, and if you have 30 or higher, then you have a fairly high hazard. If it's greater than 35, then you have extreme. And yeah, that's kind of how you carry out the assessment. If you have any concerns or you want somebody to walk you through that, we can certainly help with these kind of assessments. Other things to consider, these are some good tips if you discussed wildfire damage and loss with your insurance provider. Some insurance providers may not even cover you. It may be factored under acts of God, and so it's a good thing to double check to make sure you have coverage, particularly if you're in a high risk area. Is your roof in good or poor condition? And it decreases over time, so if your asphalt shingles are starting to lift and you get in pockets of the debris and things hiding in amongst them, then it's not going to be as fire resistant as a newly shingled roof. This is a common issue we run into with the fire department. Is your chimney clean? Does it have the proper clearances, screens, and spark arresters? So what can often happen is over time you get creosote built up in your chimney, and it may catch fire someday, which is quite exciting and sounds like a rocket taking off in your chimney. And it can put out sparks and have fire kind of shooting out the top of your chimney, in which case having these screens and spark arresters can really help from it spreading other places. And yeah, do remember to clean your chimney once in a while. And there's some other considerations in here I'll let you read. The other big one that we run into, particularly when there's high windstorms, is whether your power lines are clear. And so if you have dead trees that are going to fall over and touch the high voltage lines, especially the service lines that run through your neighborhood, then consider removing those. And if they're close to the utility, be very careful, because they can arc down the tree and cause sparking on the ground. And a lot of people have trouble with burn barrels or burning pits, and the materials getting away from them. It's tricky with high winds. It doesn't take much for something to pop out of that barrel and then get blown into some grass or something. We've gone to a few fires that way. And then you can make some notes and put together some emergency kits in case you have to leave, and have an evacuation plan. So this is a quick run through what kind of things we look at for an assessment, and hopefully get you a feel for it. If you have any questions, please let me know, and thanks for watching.